Where's Noble? What about Dillon? What about Scarlett? Simmonds? Anyone? Those are real comments from this channel in the last few days. And somebody wrote this one, which I've thought about more than the rest. Jenkins is not common. I wonder where it came from. My dad came from Portland. You've been asking. Some of you have watched every video on this channel and never once seen your own name. So this entire video is yours. 15 surnames, every single one requested in the comments. None of them covered before. Now, before we start, a few of you are going to look at this list and say, these are British names. Why are you calling them Jamaican? You're right. Nearly all of them are. English, Scottish, Irish, Welsh, and in one case on this list, German. That is exactly the point, and it has been the point of every video on this channel. The surname is not your ancestry. The surname is the address. It tells you which estate, in which parish, in which decade. And once you have that, the registers tell you which stretch of the African coast those estates were buying from. The name is British. What's underneath it never was. Here's what most people never got told. In 1816, colonial authorities in Jamaica passed a law forcing every enslaver on the island to register every person they held. Name, age, African-born or Creole. Updated every 3 years, in writing, by law. It wasn't decency. Britain had banned the trade in 1807, and slavers kept smuggling anyway. The slave registers were an accounting tool, a way to catch people cheating. But an accounting tool built to protect property leaves behind the same thing as a census, if the people being counted are the ones reading it 200 years later. Those volumes sit at the National Archives in Kew, under the series T71. They're digitized, they're searchable. And here's why the names in this video matter more than the common ones. A Smith has 300 estates to search. A Stanbury has 3. Rare names are harder to find and far easier to follow. Most of this list is rare. 15 names, counting down. Stay for number 10, because that one isn't British at all. It's German, and there is a village in St. James that explains why. Number 2 is the most misunderstood name on the island. Somebody commented that it came from Scotland. It didn't, and where it actually came from is stranger. And number 1 is a name carried by a woman from a district in St. Catherine who ended up running the country. Before we start, keep commenting your surname and your parish. Every name in this video came from that comment section. And if your name still isn't here, say it again. Say it louder. I read them, I write them down. And the list for the next video is already being built out of what you leave below this one. 15 down to 1. Number 15. Pitter Pitter is one of the rarest names on this list, and one of the most useful. It's English in origin, from a pit or a hollow, a topographic name for someone who lived by one. In England, it barely registers. In Jamaica, it survives, concentrated in Manchester, in the southern uplands. And Manchester is the youngest parish on the island. It didn't exist until 1814, carved out of Clarendon, St. Elizabeth, and Vere, 3 years before the registers began. Which means a Manchester family almost always arrives from somewhere else. If your name is Pitter, your trail runs through one of those 3 parishes first. That's not a dead end. That's an instruction about where to look. Manchester's ancestry is inherited from the southwest, predominantly Gold Coast, Ashanti and Fante country, modern Ghana, arriving secondhand. Number 14. Stanbury. Stanbury is English and topographic. From Stan and Burr, the stone fort. There are places called Stanbury in Devon and in Yorkshire. A commenter gave me Stanbury out of St. Mary and Kingston. alongside Brown and Ennis, and said something that matters. Their grandfathers knew each other in Jamaica, and the families married in. That's the pattern this channel keeps finding. Surnames don't travel alone. They lock together because the people carrying them were on the same property, moved as a group when the estate changed hands, and married each other for 6 generations after. St. Mary's registers lean toward the Bight of Biafra, the Niger Delta, Igbo territory, the ports at Bonny and Old Calabar. Number 13. Ennis is Irish. From Innis, an island, and it belongs to County Clare. The Irish presence in Jamaica is real and much less discussed than the Scottish one. Cromwell shipped Irish prisoners to the Caribbean in the 1650s. Others came as indentured labor, as overseers, and eventually as planters. Ennis in Jamaica sits around St. Mary on the north coast, and St. Mary is where the largest uprising of the 18th century Caribbean began. Easter, 1760. Frontier and Trinity Estates. A man the records call Tacky, described in contemporary accounts as having been a chief in Fante country before he was taken. It spread parish to parish and took the British more than a year to suppress. Number 12. Dillon. What about Dillon? So, Dillon, it's Irish, but not Gaelic Irish. It's Norman, from De Leon, a family that came into Ireland with the Anglo-Norman invasion in the 12th century and became one of the great houses of Westmeath. So, a Dillon in Jamaica is carrying a French-Norman name that became Irish, that became Caribbean. 3 countries deep before it ever crossed the Atlantic. It's uncommon on the island, which, as always on this list, makes it findable. Number 11. Simmonds. Simmonds, anyone? Yes, Simmonds comes from Simon, or from the older Germanic Sigemund, victory and protection. It arrived in England with the Normans and spread as a patronymic. In Jamaica, it's scattered but persistent, holding on in the eastern and central parishes. And Simmonds is a good example of something worth understanding about the registers. A name that's uncommon but not vanishingly rare is often the best case of all for research. Common enough that the family stayed traceable through church records, rare enough that you're not sorting through 400 entries. That's the sweet spot. If your name is in it, you have a better chance than almost anybody. Number 10. Tapper now, the one that isn't British. Tapper is German, an occupational name from a tapster or a brewer. Somebody commented it to me as Von Tapper, and that Von is the giveaway. Here's why a German surname is on a Jamaican list. In 1835, 1 year after the Abolition Act took effect, the colonial authorities and Jamaican landowners began importing European settlers. The stated reason was labor. The unstated reason, written plainly in the correspondence of the period, was to increase the white population of the island now that the enslaved were being freed. Around 1,000 Germans arrived. Many were settled at Seaford Town in St. James, on land granted by Lord Seaford. They were promised land and support. What they got was mountain interior, malaria, and near total abandonment. Many died in the first years. The survivors stayed, intermarried, and their descendants are still there. Seaford Town exists today. There are Jamaicans in that district with German surnames and German features who have never left St. James. If your name is Tapper, that's your thread, and it's a completely different story from every other name on this list. And that's 10. The next 5 are the ones people have been asking about longest, including 2 that almost nobody gets right. Number 9. Matthews. Matthews is son of Matthew. Hebrew in root, Matityahu, gift of God, carried into England through the church. A commenter gave me Matthews out of Portland, and Portland is the most distinctive corridor on the island. It's wet, mountainous, and hard to reach. Its estates were smaller, and it never bought in the bulk the western sugar parishes did. What Portland's registers show instead is a notably high share from the Bight of Benin, Yoruba and Fon country, modern Benin, and southwestern Nigeria. That corridor left fingerprints all over Jamaican drumming, folk religion, and spiritual practice that are still visible today. And Portland is nanny country. Above Port Antonio, in terrain the British Army could not march through, the Windward Maroons fought to a standstill under a woman commander and forced a treaty in 1739. Number 8. Pierce. Can you please look for Anderson and Pierce? Pierce, Portland. Pierce comes from Piers, the Norman French form of Peter, and it's especially strong in Wales and the English West Country. Same parish as Matthews, same Bight of Benin corridor. And here's why that pairing is worth noting. 2 families, 2 surnames, 1 parish, and Portland is small enough, and its estates were few enough that a Pierce and a Matthews from the same district are very likely looking at the same handful of properties. That's not speculation. That's what a small parish with a small number of estates means in practice. Number 7, Noble. Where's Noble? Right here. Noble came into England with the Normans from Old French noble, and it was originally a nickname. And nicknames in medieval England were frequently ironic, which is worth sitting with because it means the name may have started as a joke at somebody's expense 800 years ago, traveled through England, crossed the Atlantic in a ledger, attached itself to people who never chose it, and became, in Jamaica, a name carried with complete seriousness by families who have every right to it. The joke, if it ever was one, stopped being funny about 4 centuries ago. The name outlived everybody who was in on it. Number 6, Scarlett. What about Scarlett? Scarlett is English and occupational. From the rich red cloth. A scarlet was a dyer or a seller of that cloth, and it was expensive fabric, so the name attached to people in a specific and prosperous trade. In Jamaica, it concentrates in the southern parishes, Manchester and St. Elizabeth, and it's common enough there to function almost as a district name, Gold Coast Corridor. And on the northern edge of St. Elizabeth sits Akompong, the maroon town founded by people who escaped in the earliest decades of British rule, named for the brother of Cudjoe, who forced the British into a treaty in 1739 because they could not win. It's still there. It still holds a degree of self-government. It still marks that treaty every January the 6th. Same parish, same ancestry. One side on the estates, one side in the hills. Number 5, Jenkins. Jenkins is not common. I wonder where it came from. It came from Wales. Jenkins is Jenkin, a diminutive of John, filtered through the Welsh Hywel plus the possessive. It is one of the most characteristically Welsh surnames there is. And the Welsh presence in Jamaica is the least discussed of all of them. There were far fewer Welshmen than Scots or Irish, but they were here, and they held property. Powell, A.P. Hywel, is another. So is Price, from Ap Rhys. The commenter said Portland, and a Welsh name in Portland is genuinely unusual, because the Welsh landholdings were concentrated more in the center of the island, which makes it exactly the kind of name where the estate records can give a real answer, rather than a regional one. Rare name, unexpected parish, small number of possible properties. If you're a Jenkins from Portland, you have one of the most searchable combinations on this entire list. Number 4, Maitland. Maitland is Scottish, and the etymology is uncomfortable in an interesting way. It comes from Norman French mottelant, bad temper, ill will. A nickname, again, and not a kind one. It became a great Scottish family name in Lauderdale, and it arrived in Jamaica with the 18th century Scottish influx. By the late 1700s, roughly a third of white men on the island were estimated to be Scots. A commenter gave me Maitland out of St. Catherine, and St. Catherine is the parish that held the paperwork on everybody else. Spanish Town was the capital until 1872. The clerks, the record offices, the colonial secretary. The paper trail for the whole island ran through there. St. Catherine also absorbed 3 parishes that no longer exist: St. Dorothy, St. Tite, John, and St. Thomas in the Vale. If your family's trail vanishes in an old document with a parish name you can't find on a map, that is almost always why. Its estates bought heavily through the Gold Coast early, then shifted toward West Central Africa, Congo, and Mbundu as the century wore on. Number 3. Duffus is Scottish, from a place in Moray in the northeast. And there is a castle there, built in the 12th century, still standing as a ruin today. In Scotland, the surname is now scarce. In Jamaica, it thrives. That reversal is one of the most consistent findings on this channel. Names that all but died in the country that made them, and are carried today by thousands of Jamaicans. Holness, Facey, Nemhard, and Duffus. And the name carries weight in Jamaican public life. Sir Herbert Duffus served as Chief Justice of Jamaica and led the commission of inquiry that bears his name. A Norman-Scottish place name from a castle in Moray that is now more Jamaican than Scottish, and which sat at the head of the Jamaican judiciary within living memory. Number 2, Taylor number 2, and this is the one people get wrong. A commenter wrote, in good faith, Taylor originated from Scotland. It didn't. Taylor is Norman French, from tailleur, one who cuts. It came into England in 1066 with the Norman conquest and became one of the most common occupational surnames in the English language because every settlement of any size needed someone who could cut cloth. There are, of course, Scottish tailors. There are tailors everywhere. But the name is not Scottish in origin, and it is not Gaelic. In Jamaica, it is one of the most widespread surnames on the island. In every parish, on every kind of estate, which means as an arrow it's nearly useless on its own. And that tells you something else instead. A name that common, that evenly spread, that untethered from any one property, usually means it was taken or confirmed at emancipation in 1838, when hundreds of thousands of people needed a surname for the first time as free citizens and chose one that belonged to nobody in particular. Taylor isn't a weak signal. It's a signal about the moment of freedom itself. If you're a tailor, the name won't give you the answer. The parish will. Ask which one, every time. Number 1. Simpson and number 1. Simpson is son of Simon. English and Scottish. Ordinary, unremarkable. It arrived in Jamaica the way most of these did, attached to an estate. A commenter gave me Simpson out of Clarendon, the Central Plain, where the largest estates on the island operated. Bulk purchasing, and consequently some of the clearest shipping records in the whole archive. Gold Coast Akan early, then a rising share of West Central Africa as demand outgrew supply. But the reason Simpson is number 1 is a district called Wood Hall in St. Catherine. In 1945, a girl was born there. Her family had no money. She went to school in the countryside, worked her way through, entered local government, then national politics, and in 2006, she became the first woman ever to lead Jamaica as Prime Minister. Portia Simpson Miller. They called her Sista P, from a rural district in St. Catherine, the parish where the slave registers for the entire island were filed, to the office that runs the country. And that is the whole arc of this channel in one name. The surname came from an estate. The estate came from a man who owned people. And 200 years later, a woman carrying that name was the head of the government. The paperwork was written to keep her family in a column. It ended up recording where she started.